start talking now. It's just really overwhelmingly, I'm grateful for all of you coming, and it's so great to see so many friends and familiar faces, and even a few that I'd never met before. There was, some of you may know, well, anyway, it's just really great to see you all. I do want to introduce my husband, Dmitry Gerasimenko.
Hi. Nice to meet you. Thank
you. He's a huge support of my life, and we've actually been married 11 years already. So the time really goes by fast. And, he's busy getting some plays ready. He produces plays and directs them in Russian. So his next one's coming up in a few weeks now. In the meantime, he's going to actually in Shakopee do one in English, 2 Chekhov short plays in the Black Box Theater at the new high school, which has never been used. So in August, he'll be doing a play in English with many of the actors will have Russian accents. So I wanted to say that. Well, as you know, I wrote a book, and I don't know, some of you did actually not know that I had been married before when I came to Shakopee, but I was married when I was 18 years old to Carl Kasalke, who was a very well-known Minnesota Viking football player. He was a wonderful man, a wonderful, fantastic football player, as many of you know. And he was a good family man, a thoughtful guy. He loved me to pieces, and after a few years, he began to change. And at the time, I didn't know why that was, and nobody actually understood at the time. I thought it was the cult of celebrity. He started to drink way too much, and he did have alcoholism in his family, so I thought, well, it's alcoholism. But now there's a lot of new research going on that shows that concussions, even a few concussions, can cause permanent lifetime brain disability, which can develop later in life. Carl, in the time that I knew him, in just those first few years of marriage, probably had 20 to 30 concussions. It was a badge of honor to say you had your bell rung. And I don't know, you know, for me the metaphor is sort of interesting because what happens with a concussion is the brain rattles around inside the bony skull, which is kind of like a clapper ringing a bell. So, you know, all those years when everybody's kept coming out of the game saying, I just had my bell rung, they really did. And what we didn't know was the devastating effect that that had on the guys. In fact, when I met Carl, I was playing powder puff football, and I got kicked in the head and had a concussion. And when you read the book, you'll note that I commented that I was so tired after that. That was my freshman year of college, and I just thought it was because I carried a heavy load and a double major. But in fact, it was probably post-concussion syndrome. And I was just so exhausted that entire year. But nobody, neurologists, doctors, and in fact, until well into my career, and I'm talking about the last few years of my career, did we ever pay much attention to concussions as anything significant. But now, of course, the Boston University studies have shown that there are brains that look like Swiss cheese in guys that have played football, and some boxers they have as well. And we know that there's a very specific set of things that occur in these men. I don't think they have any women's brains in the studies yet, but no doubt it occurs the same. And it begins with poor judgment, impulsive behavior, the triggering of any sort of genetic things that might be there, like alcoholism, may get triggered by the repeat concussions, eventually leading to severe neurologic degeneration and death. And things that look like Alzheimer's, or things that are, in fact, Lou Gehrig's disease, which we now know probably comes from many things, not just one thing. So, you know, with that said, this book sort of chronicles my life with a good man who started doing bad things. And I never stopped thinking of him as a good man, but I couldn't live with him anymore eventually. And now, all these years later, I really feel that in death, he can still be helpful to people by bringing to light this really major issue. And with that said, I'm going to just read you a few things from the book, and we'll kind of focus on some other things. One thing that we didn't have a term for at that time was stalkers. And I want to read this specifically because it has a lot to do with Shakopee. So I'm going to read this one thing. So we didn't have a term for this, but I had a stalker. And I'm reading on page 180 right now. So during this preseason, one of the preseasons football, one shocking event takes place. The call in the middle of the night, which by the way I had had several of prior to that from women. But this call in the middle of the night proves to be a theme of my life. And I received another one on our unlisted number. The phone rings at 3 a.m. and I answer it with a feeling of dread. The last call like this wasn't very good news. This time, though, it's a man. With a peculiar, flat voice, he says, "I watch you at the medical school and at the student union. I know where you take your boys to Rose's daycare. I'll kidnap your children. If you don't meet me tomorrow by the third column in the main room of Kaufman Student Union at exactly 1 p.m. And believe me, I'll do it. Don't call the police or there'll be worse trouble. I also know where your house is in Burnsville." And he hangs up. Now remember, this was an unlisted number. I had no idea how this person got my number. My immediate reaction is gastrointestinal. I race to the bathroom and have diarrhea. I have a stalker. And this is before such a concept is even a word. But clearly someone's been watching me and knows my pattern, and somehow he has my phone number. I can't get back to sleep. My mind is very noisy as I sift through all the possibilities and dangers of this man. Something about the call, though, just doesn't ring true to me. With probably very foolish bravado, I make up my mind as to what to do. I don't even bother to tell Carl, who has once again slept right through the call. I guess this is a clear statement about the state of our marriage. I don't go to Kaufman Union the next day. In fact, I will avoid the building the rest of my medical school days. I've warned Rose not to open the door to strangers or to let our kids be outside. All is quiet, and I pick up the kids and drive them home at the end of the day, quite uneventfully. But just a scant moment after we've come in from the car, the phone rings. "Jan, I told you not to have the police there. Why did you do that? Now I'll really have to punish you." Of course, I didn't have the police there, so I forge away with my planned speech in all my bravado. "You know what?" I say with the sternest voice, trying to control my quaver as best I can. "If you think I'm afraid of some guy who masturbates while he calls women to scare them, you better think again." And I hung up. Fortunately, because in the future I'll learn just how dangerous a stalker can be, this particular stalker doesn't reveal himself to me again. Years later, in 1974, a most unsettling event occurs. As a family physician in Shakopee, Minnesota, I'm required to rotate with the other doctors in doing the examination and care of mental patients admitted to the hospital by the court system for a 72-hour hold. This doesn't occur anymore, but this was 1974. This 3-day period is used to decide the disposition and forward-going care of these patients, whether it be a psychiatric hospital, a state mental institution, a prison psychiatric ward, or release for outpatient care. Most of the patients admitted to the hospital for this purpose don't have their own doctors, so we're assigned in rotation. On this day, I must see a man from Waconia who is a paranoid schizophrenic. He has stopped taking his medication and his family has felt threatened by his behavior. So the nurse leads me down the hall to the locked room on the medical ward. Her shoes squeak as we walk to the very end of the hall. There, she lifts out a ring of keys from her pocket and unlocks the door to his room. First the outer door, then the inner. This is in the old St. Francis Hospital. And there were 3 rooms on the end of the hall that had double doors on them. She introduces me to him, then turns with a loud squeak and exits the room, locking me in alone with him. I feel safe because the red panic button is right behind me. I can get help if I need it. The man is wild-eyed, disheveled, and unshaven. He has a noticeable, unpleasant animal smell, and his long brown hair is stringy. I say, "I'm Dr. Jan Adams, and I've been assigned to make sure you have everything you need while you're here." He looks me straight in the eyes and says, "I know who you are. I used to watch you at Kaufman Union." This is 6 years after that call in the middle of the night. But I immediately know I'm locked in a room with my stalker, and it isn't a good feeling. I have to contain my reaction to him somehow and disguise my fear. I can't lose control of the situation, if in fact I have any. Not only is this the man, he clearly has continued to stalk me, as I've changed names since that terrible call. Yet he still recognizes me. "I was hoping I'd see you. I knew you worked at this hospital." Trying my best to be respectful, but well aware that I might be in danger, I press the red button. And then I try to engage him in conversation. He's actually risen from the bed and is walking toward me, trance-like, around the bed. "What's been happening in your life to land you here today?" I say, with a slight tremble in my voice. I can hear the hurried squeaking coming down the hall, and I'm holding my breath that the nurse will get me out of this room in time. The doors begin to rattle, and I know she's working the keys to get to me. When he hears this, he stops coming toward me and mildly goes back to sitting on the bed. The nurse bursts in, deep worry lines on her forehead. "Dr. Adams, are you all right?" "I'm okay, but I think there's a conflict of interest here. I'm afraid you'll have to assign another doctor for this gentleman." As I leave the room, he calls after me, "See you around." I head straight for the doctor's lounge, pop open a can of Tab, remember that? And sink into a couch. There aren't any other doctors around, so I just sob a few times and then straighten up and get on with the rest of my day. See you around. These are not comforting words. I never did see him again, but I kept track of him for a few years. All during that time, he was hospitalized at a state mental institution. At some point, I just forgot about any threat from him, and that was that, I thought. When my son Corey read the first draft of this book, he told me a very disturbing story, one he had completely forgotten. When he was a freshman at the University of Minnesota in 1986, feeling a bit alone and homesick, he was crossing the bridge over the Minnesota River near Kaufman Union. Suddenly, a strange, disheveled man with dark hair and a nervous tick of twitching 2 fingers on his nose approached him and started peppering him with questions about me. "I know you're Corey